Far beyond the shifting sands of the Sahara, where the horizon melts into the sky, stands a city whose name has echoed across continents, a city of legends, of learning, of wonder. Timbuktu. To many, it is a myth, to scholars, a beacon. But what truly lies behind the tales of manuscripts, of desert caravans, of Moorish architecture and city of scholars? We must begin in the desert. Not the Sahara you think of, vast dunes and endless heat, but the Sahara's edge, where life clings to oases, where rivers like the Niger pulse with hidden power. Timbuktu sits near the southern edge of the Sahara, on the southern bank of the Niger River's inland delta. A place of transition, between desert and savanna, between North and West Africa, between trade routes and the unknown. Before Timbuktu was the name whispered in the courts of sultans, before its manuscripts became prized by scholars across the world, it was a land of small communities, nomads, traders, farmers, who knew this land's dangers and its odd beauties. The Songhai, the Tuareg, the Berbers, the Mande peoples, among others, made up the tapestry of human life in this region, adapting to drought, guiding caravans, mastering trade, language, culture. According to oral traditions, Timbuktu began as a seasonal camp. One tradition says it was founded in the late 1100s by nomadic Tuareg clans who came searching for salt, Tinbiu Tuktu in their language, place of the camel's belly or with water where the camel kneels. Another version suggests a woman, characteristically free-spirited in many African oral histories, named Timbuktu or Timbuktu after whom the place was named, though sources differ. What is certain, by the 13th century, trade was underway. Phone relatives of the earlier camel caravans, loaded with salt, gold dust, kola nuts, ivory, continuing across the steaming plains, crossing the unforgiving dunes, guided by stars and by men who knew every rock and every wind. Salt from the Sahara's salt mines, pure, precious. Gold from the forests to the south, dazzling, valuable. These were the twin engines of trans-Saharan trade. Caravans left routes from the Mediterranean north, from Marrakesh, from Cairo, from Tunis, passing through desert oases, Berber way stations, descending toward Niger's floodplains. And Timbuktu, lying at a crossroads of these trade arteries, where desert, river, and forest met, began to grow. Not only goods passed, so did ideas, religion, culture, language. Muslim scholars from the Maghreb, from Egypt, from Andalusia, journeyed sporadically with caravans or settled. Islam, already present in West Africa, took root deeply. Timbuktu became more than a hub for trade, it became a hub for intellectual and spiritual exchange. To understand Timbuktu's golden age, one must understand the empires that nurtured and protected it. In the early 13th century, Sundiata Keita founded the Mali Empire. Its territory spread from the Atlantic coast into the heart of West Africa, controlling trade, agriculture, tribute. Under Mali, salt routes, gold mines, in Bambuk, Bior, Wangara, flourished. The empire's wealth allowed patronage, for scholarship, for construction, for court culture. Another famous Mali emperor, Mansa Musa, in the early 14th century, made his pilgrimage to Mecca, 1324 to 1325. This was no ordinary pilgrimage. Mansa Musa traveled with tens of thousands, soldiers, attendants, slaves, camels packed with gold. He distributed gold along the route so lavishly that local economies, even in Cairo, felt the inflationary shock. But more than that spectacle, he brought back architects and scholars, increased Mali's prestige, and spurred the foundation of mosques and learning centers. Timbuktu benefited indirectly, trade increased, prestige rose. Later centuries saw Mali decline, the Songhai rose. Between the 15th and 16th centuries, under rulers like Sani Ali and Askia Muhammad, the Songhai Empire was at its height, territorially, militarily, culturally. Timbuktu came under Songhai control. During Askia Muhammad's reign, 1493 to 1528, Timbuktu's institutions were strengthened. The ruler supported Islam, scholarship, built mosques, and formalized governance. His establishment of law, order, and taxation ensured that Timbuktu was safe enough for scholars to travel, for students to congregate, for manuscripts to be copied and preserved. We now enter Timbuktu's era as a global center for learning, not merely trading gold and salt, but knowledge. Three great mosques anchored Timbuktu, Jingareba, Sankor, and Sidi Yahya. These were not only places of worship, they were centers of learning. Students, from nearby regions and faraway lands, came to these madrasas to study Quranic studies, jurisprudence, grammar, theology, astronomy, mathematics even. The needed books were copied, traded, and taught. What made Timbuktu remarkable was its intellectual openness, within an Islamic framework, yes, but still a sphere where indigenous culture, local history, and African perspectives were preserved. Local languages and cultural knowledge were infused with Islamic scholarship. For example, scholars wrote in Arabic, but also in local tongues. They recorded genealogies, relations, African cosmologies alongside Islamic law. The heart of the scholarly output was manuscripts. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps up to 700,000 by some estimates, though many have been lost, of manuscripts covering theology, astronomy, mathematics, law, history, poetry, medicine. Unique texts, commentaries on the Quran, works by indigenous scholars, local transcripts of oral history, reflections on social ethics, even treatises on astronomy adapted to local observation. These manuscripts were copied by hand, passed down through families or schools, preserved in libraries. Some manuscripts show a fusion of Berber, Arab, Songhai, Mande calligraphy, and art. Their topics were sometimes highly specialized: how to calculate the flooding of the Niger, or how to cure a disease using local herbs, or how to navigate by stars crossing the Sahara. No city becomes a beacon without people. Here are some of the most remarkable individuals whose lives, scholarship, and courage shaped Timbuktu. Ahmed Baba, 1556 to 1627, possibly the most famous scholar of Timbuktu. Born in a prominent scholarly family, he wrote hundreds of texts, in logic, theology, grammar. His library was vast, he was respected across West Africa and beyond. When Morocco invaded Songhai, in 1591, he was captured and taken to Morocco, but many of his works survived, influencing Islamic scholarship far southwards. Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan traveler, when passing through Timbuktu in the mid-14th century, described it as one of the most beautiful cities of the Sudan and praised its learning. His accounts contributed to the mythic prestige of the place. Askia Muhammad, the Songhai ruler who reformed the empire's institutions, promoted scholarship, built mosques, encouraged scholars to write and teach. Under him, Timbuktu's scholars were active participants in jurisprudence, administrative correspondence, diplomacy. Qadi Ibrahim al-Sanusi, Ibn al-Mukhtar, al-Muminat bin Sulayman, many less known outside specialist circles, but locally powerful, judges, teachers, exegetes. They preserved genealogical lines of teaching, they wrote biographies, they adjudicated law, they served communities. What kind of city was Timbuktu socially, culturally, beyond mosques and manuscripts? The city was a crossroads: Mande, Malinki, Bambara, Soninke, Songhai, Tuareg, Berber, Fulani, Hausa, Wolof among traders, and Arab scholars. Languages mixed. Arabic was the scholarly lingua franca, local languages used in everyday life. Trade languages, Hausa, Songhai, used for commerce. Though many histories focus on men, women in Timbuktu had roles. In oral tradition, in preserving lineage, in copying texts, in teaching younger children. Some women are believed to have been scholars or patrons, though many works are lost or unattributed. Markets bustled. Traders from the south brought kola nuts, gold, ivory, cloth. From the north, salt, dates, horses, beads. Goods, but also ideas and foods and fashions. Craftsmen, paper makers, though paper was often imported, leather workers, metal workers, for lamps, gates, decorative grills, calligraphers, illuminators. Art and architecture, the mud brick style, the Sudano-Sahelian architecture, thick walls, wooden beams, flat roofs, towers. The mosques themselves were works of art. Doors, minbars, pulpits, windows showing local wood carving. Interiors decorated with carved stucco and possibly some geometric ornamentation. Timbuktu was not isolated. Its fame and connections radiated outward. Scholars traveled from Morocco, Egypt, Andalusia, and the Maghreb. Others journeyed from West Africa to Mecca and back, bringing holy books, new ideas, new methods of teaching. Timbuktu was part of the broader Islamic scholarship network. Rulers corresponded with others. Letters to North Africa, the Maghreb, possibly even the Ottoman Empire. Gifts were exchanged. Timbuktu was known in European maps, though often distorted, in travelers' accounts. Europeans first heard of Timbuktu through tales of gold, of rich and mysterious cities. At times, the city entered myth, glowing descriptions, or being conflated with paradise. The earliest European explorers who tried to reach Timbuktu often found great difficulty: harsh travel, unreliable guides, danger. That only added to Timbuktu's mystique. But the Golden Age had its own cracks. Climate and environmental pressures. The spread of desertification, fluctuations of the Niger, droughts, seasonal rains, all these shaped life. When the river's flooding didn't happen well, crops failed. When trade routes shifted, communities suffered. Internal politics and succession crises, empires have trouble. The Songhai, for all its strength, faced rivalries among commanders, among regional leaders. Shifting loyalties among Tuareg groups. Local chiefs sometimes resisted central authority. Sometimes scholars or elites staked their own regional power. External threats brewing, larger imperial powers nearby. The rising interest of Morocco to control trans-Saharan trade. The eventual Moroccan invasion. Everything changed in 1591. The Sultan of Morocco, Ahmed al-Mansur, intent on controlling trans-Saharan trade, especially to get the gold revenues, and expanding his sphere of influence, sent a large army southwards. The Battle of Tondibi, 1591, was decisive. The Songhai forces, though large and proud, were defeated. Timbuktu came under Moroccan control. This did not immediately destroy its institutions, but a shift began. Many scholars were taken north as captives, the funding for local institutions was diverted, authority changed. The Moroccan administrators had difficulty governing far-off lands, the climate, distances, resistance. Importantly, the Moroccan invasion disrupted the flow of trade. Some caravan routes were diverted, some traders avoided risky territories. The local economy suffered. Despite those shocks, Timbuktu did not vanish overnight. Its scholars continued to write, to teach. Libraries continued, though under strain. Manuscripts continued to be copied, though fewer in number. Local community life persisted. There are stories of families hiding manuscripts, preserving traditions orally, passing down knowledge. Some scholars negotiated with new rulers, adapting to Moroccan rule or later to local sultanates. The question is, when does a golden age fade? How does knowledge survive political collapse or external conquest? What is the legacy of those early centuries? Now you know how Timbuktu came to be more than a name, how trade, empire, courage, and scholarship built a city that shone in the desert. But its story does not end here. In part 2, we will journey through decline and revival, how colonialism, neglect, natural disaster, war, and renewal all left marks. And how today, Timbuktu still whispers its stories, if we dare listen. In the golden light of its past, Timbuktu was a city of scholars, of knowledge, of manuscripts that shone like stars. But golden lights can fade, sands can cover foundations, time can twist truth. The Moroccan conquest of 1591 under Sultan Ahmed al-Mansur was the beginning of a new era for Timbuktu, one marked by foreign rule, internal restructuring, and changing flows of power. The Moroccan Sultanate attempted to administer Timbuktu from far away. The costs of maintaining troops, supplying distant garrisons, managing local resistance, and traversing long, dangerous routes over Sahara were enormous. Many Moroccan administrators were not familiar with local cultures, languages, practices. Corruption, misunderstanding, friction with local elites occurred. Local scholars, chiefs, religious leaders attempted to retain local autonomy. Some accommodated Moroccan rule, others resisted overtly or covertly. Timbuktu became less of a political power center, more of a spiritual and scholarly repository. Some sultans of later local or regional control emerged, but none matched the imperial structure of Mali or Songhai. As European sea routes around Africa grew, trade moved toward the coast. The Atlantic slave trade, European colonialism, external powers diminished the centrality of the Sahara routes. Caravans became fewer. Timbuktu's position as a resupply, trade, and intellectual hub declined. Sand, drought, pestilence, disease exacerbated social stresses. From the 18th to the 19th centuries, European powers cast their eyes on West Africa. Though Timbuktu was remote, its significance as a symbol, and its territory, made it a site of interest. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the French pushed inland from coastal West Africa, they incorporated the region including Timbuktu into French Sudan. Colonial rule brought new administrative systems, new languages, French, new power centers. Timbuktu became marginalized, remote, difficult to govern, expensive to administer. Infrastructure was minimal. The colonial powers often saw local learning as backward. They didn't invest in preserving manuscripts or local institutions, unless as curiosities. Some European and Arab scholars collected manuscripts, wrote about Timbuktu. Some good, some exploitative. Many manuscripts were taken out of the country, ending up in European libraries. This had the dual effect of preserving some texts yet separating them from their cultural and social context. As the 20th century progressed, Timbuktu's past loomed larger than its present. The world began to realize what was at risk. Desertification, erosion, shifting sands. Climate change adds new pressures. The mud brick mosques need constant maintenance. The Niger's flood cycles changed, droughts affect agriculture and water supplies. Northern Mali has been volatile. Rebel groups, jihadist groups, climate stress, economic marginalization. Timbuktu has been caught up in some of that conflict. Some manuscripts were destroyed, looted, or threatened. With political instability, tourism drops. Funding for preservation diminishes. Many manuscript collections are privately owned. Families sometimes lack resources to protect them: fire, termites, humidity, theft. On one hand, globalization, internet, modern scholarship can help digitize, catalog, share manuscripts. On the other hand, mass tourism or commercialization could lead to damage, looting, or commodification. Despite decline, the world did not forget Timbuktu. In the 19th century, explorers like René Caillie, 1828, risked crossing the Sahara to reach Timbuktu, finding a city of mud houses, markets, mosques, less opulent than the myth, but deeply fascinating. His descriptions helped bring Timbuktu into European consciousness in more real terms. Historians and linguists began serious study of the manuscripts. Local scholars too worked to preserve oral histories, genealogy, storytelling traditions. Some African universities began projects to collect, preserve, and study manuscripts. In 1988, Timbuktu's three great mosques, Jingareba, Sankor, Sidi Yahya, were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This brought some recognition and support, though recognition sometimes outpaces funding. In recent decades, local families, local libraries, international NGOs, and universities have worked to digitize manuscripts, scan fragile texts, build catalogs, train conservators. Some manuscripts have been saved from destruction by smuggling them out or hiding them, others stored safely in vaults or private homes. One of the darkest chapters in recent history came in 2012, when Islamist militant groups took control of northern Mali, including Timbuktu. Their ideology saw local cultural symbols, especially the three mosques and manuscripts, as heretical. Some mausoleums and mausoleum tombs of saints were destroyed. Sidi Yahya was damaged, heritage sites attacked. Manuscripts were threatened with destruction. Local people, librarians, priests acted rapidly. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts were secretly moved, smuggled to safety, to Bamako, the capital, to southern Mali, even abroad. Humble families hid texts in their homes, in secret compartments, sometimes under floorboards or in thatched houses. After Malian, French, and international forces retook Timbuktu, efforts began to restore damage. UNESCO and others committed to reconstruction. Debates ensued over authenticity, restoration methods, ownership, access. This period revealed something profound. For many local Timbuktu citizens, these manuscripts were not just books, they were identity, dignity, memory. What remains, today, of Timbuktu's heritage? And why does it matter, not just to Mali, but to Africa and the world? For many Malians, West Africans, Africans diasporic and local, Timbuktu is a symbol of Africa's intellectual heritage. A counter-narrative to colonial and post-colonial depictions of Africa as dark, knowing nothing. Timbuktu shows Africa produced knowledge, preserved civilizations, built universities. Some manuscripts are still studied in Africa, by Africans. The traditions of Islamic scholarship, jurisprudence, oral law, history, continue. New scholars are trying to publish translations, editions. Local schools teach about the history of Timbuktu. Workshops and cultural festivals celebrate it. Before instability, Timbuktu attracted cultural tourists, researchers, journalists. The hope is that with stabilization, appropriate funding, community involvement, sustainable tourism can help revive local economies. Museums, cultural centers, manuscript libraries can serve both locals and visitors. Timbuktu's struggle raises questions. Who owns history? When foreign institutions hold manuscripts from Africa, is that preservation or plunder? How do we restore cultural heritage without erasing local agency? Digital archiving helps, but what about context, access, rights? Let's zoom in on some individual tales, not names you've heard in standard textbooks, to show the richness and mystery still hidden in Timbuktu's manuscripts. A family in a small quarter of Timbuktu has a manuscript of a treatise on astronomy, hand-drawn charts, that calculates the movements of stars and predicts the flooding of the Niger. It's almost unknown, unstudied. The text blends indigenous observations, from fishermen, river levels, with classical Islamic astronomy. A centuries-old medical text. Remedies using local plants, but combining them with knowledge from Arabia, Persia, North Africa. Diagnoses of malaria, by symptoms then, use of herbs now endangered. Some of these plants are now rare. The manuscripts become both medical relics and possible sources of ethnobotanical knowledge. A poetry anthology in which poems in Arabic are paired with versions in Songhai or Bambara. Oral poets have memoized versions. The manuscripts record variant lines. Some poems question power, lament loss, sing praises of ancestors, love, the river, the desert. Parchments tracing lineages of families, not only of scholars, but of traders, of slaves. Yes, the unfortunate history includes slavery, of women, of local chiefs. These genealogies preserve pre-colonial social memory, who was related to whom, where migration came from, where settlements were. Some villages only know lost lineages through such manuscripts. Saving Timbuktu's past is not just about collecting manuscripts, it's about decisions. Who preserves, how, who accesses them, how much is public, how much personal. Traditional methods, storing manuscripts in wooden chests, cloth wrappings, cool shaded rooms. Modern methods, conservation labs, controlled humidity, digitization. The challenge, remote location, funding, trained conservators, risk of theft. Many manuscripts are in private hands, families who have held them for generations. Should they be nationalized? Should they be kept local? Should foreign libraries hosting Timbuktu manuscripts repatriate or make them available digitally? Who decides? Some projects have scanned manuscripts, made high-resolution images, made them accessible online. This helps researchers globally. But digital access has limits. Lack of translation, lack of context, lack of infrastructure for local people to see the digital versions. Visitors want to see manuscripts, see the mosques. But bringing crowds into fragile buildings causes wear. How to protect the buildings, limit damage, avoid commercialization that erodes dignity. Crucial. Local scholars, families, custodians should shape the narrative. Not outsiders dictating what's important. Many manuscripts deal with local law, local culture, oral histories that outsiders might overlook. Preserving not just the texts, but the living tradition of storytelling, of teaching, of recitation, of dance, of prayers. What does Timbuktu mean today, in poetry, in film, in identity, in protest? Across African literature, Timbuktu is invoked as proof that Africa was not blank before colonialism. It had centers of learning, that scholars moved, that knowledge was rich. Filmmakers, photographers, poets have made works about Timbuktu. The city's mud mosques, its manuscripts, its desert sunsets, its Tuareg culture, its river life, these are subjects of art. Malians living abroad, West Africans, Africans in general sometimes refer to Timbuktu in songs, in social media, as a proud heritage. Sometimes ironically, from Timbuktu meaning very remote, but increasingly with respect. Universities and schools, both in Africa and globally, are including Timbuktu in African history courses, Islamic studies, heritage preservation programs. As we look ahead, Timbuktu's story is not over. Its future depends on many things. And perhaps that is where we all have a stake. Without peace, stability, good governance in Mali, heritage cannot be protected. Local authorities, national government, international partners need to ensure security, funds, legal protection. Preservation requires money, for conservation labs, for climate control, for manuscript safe storage, for restorers, for digitization. Infrastructure, roads, electricity, internet, all help. Train local conservators, local historians, local librarians. Empower local youth to see manuscript preservation as not remote or elite, but as belonging to them. Move toward balanced sharing, digital copies with good metadata, translation work, contextualization. Allow global scholars to study, but also ensure local people can access, read, use these works. Possibly multilingual online resources. Cultural tourism, done right, respectful, sustainable, helping local businesses, artisans, hotels, guides, craftspeople. Helping create livelihoods tied to heritage rather than extractive tourism. Global solidarity and ethical practice, Museums abroad with Timbuktu manuscripts should collaborate with Mali, possibly repatriation, possibly loans. Scholars abroad should credit local families and custodians. Funders should ensure local benefit. Timbuktu is not just a city. It is a mirror. It reflects human aspirations, to know, to record, to connect across cultures and deserts, to believe in beauty, in scholarship, in community, in the power of words. It teaches that knowledge can flourish even in remote places, under unlikely circumstances, that power built on intellectual generosity outlasts much of brute force, that preserving culture is not nostalgia, it is an act of reclaiming identity. For Africa today, Timbuktu is proof. We are not defined only by colonization, we are defined also by ancient wisdom, by scholars who taught, by texts that speak of medicine, astronomy, ethics, poetry. The past is not something distant, it lives in our languages, our oral traditions, our architecture, our identity. Thank you for joining this journey across dunes, manuscripts, history, and hope. If this story moved you, share it. Tell others about the manuscripts yet unseen, about the mosque still standing in mud, about the scholars whose names have escaped wide memory. Subscribe if you want more untold stories from Africa, places, people, ideas that were nearly lost to time.